Talking now about the tens of thousands of Quebecers who are awaiting their tax returns from the federal government. Revenue Canada can't really explain the delays that some taxpayers are so upset about. There was a problem apparently earlier in the spring with certain people who had first-time home savings accounts, but Revenue Canada says, no, that problem has been cleared up and that's no longer what's responsible for the delays. Here to help us understand whether this is actually anything unusual is Montreal Now's resident CPA, Harvey Bienenstock. Welcome back.
Thank you, Trudy. Nice talking to you for the first time.
Yes, our first time working together. Is this anything unusual to your mind that we have, 100,000 Quebecers expecting a tax return who haven't received it yet, and it's August now?
Well, it is kind of unusual. Now these Quebecers, they might be expecting either a federal refund or a Quebec refund. The federal refunds are usually much quicker, depending on whether you filed electronically or filed on paper. If you filed electronically, they usually refund it within 2 weeks. And if it's on paper, it's anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks because they have to process the return. Quebec, it's also about a 6-week delay if it's paper. Also, it depends on the due date of the tax filing. If you filed as a regular individual, your due date was April 30th. But if you had any sort of self-employment income, your due date was June 15th. So even though you would pay interest from April 30th. So with no real reason. It could be people working from home. Maybe the civil servants don't process them as quickly. There's no real clue. Quebec has always been the joke was always that Quebec would always refund the small amounts very quickly so they could say statistically most people are getting the refunds. But for the big refunds, they would kind of hold them back because they have an administrative bulletin that says they only have to start paying interest from June 15th. So that if you owe money, they charge you interest from April 30th, but if they owe you, it's from June 15th. Also, if they owe you money, they pay you interest at 4.75% as of July 1, and if you owe them, they charge you at 10%. So there's a disparity as to whether you owe or are owed, and the government needs the money, so who knows if they're squeezing their cash flows for whatever reason. I really can't explain it. Neither can they.
Ooh, squeezing their cash flow. That had not occurred to me. I was just chalking it up to bureaucratic slowness.
Well, there's no recourse. If you're owed money, you can call and complain, but they'll say, relax, you'll get your money and you'll get interest from June 15th. I think in the past it was even July 1 for Quebec, so they may have changed it. So therefore, it pays them to hold back the money, and who knows what's going on? I really can't explain it.
So this texter says, I think you've answered kind of the implication of this in one way. If there's no real reason why I haven't gotten back my $1,700 federal tax return, why can't I charge interest to class action lawsuit time? But you're saying that you do get interest after a certain period.
Yeah, the laws say that if they owe you money, they got to pay. And also, there might be some delays in processing. For example, if you submit a return that looks a little sketchy, or if the numbers are out of whack, or if you're missing the math isn't right, then they may say, well, there's a delay in processing because there's a follow-up required on the return. We find it's a little odd, therefore we're going to follow up, and therefore there's a delay in that as well.
Revenue Canada seems to be implying that it's actually doing not so bad this year compared to past years. It's saying 3% of the returns that were filed on time. In other words, the ones that went in by the deadlines, 3% of them have not yet been handled, have not yet been put through the ringer at Revenue Canada. And that was last year, 4%. So they're implying, it's not as bad as last year. I don't know if that's any come for a listener who's expecting $1,700 back. Is there anything that a taxpayer can do to reduce the chances of the return being delayed, being flagged?
No. First of all, they're the only ones that have the statistics, so you can't really argue with them. Second thing is, this was the first year, I believe, where they're starting to chase the COVID overpayment refunds. So that might be delayed for many people who they're tracking and they're matching if they owe the government money or not. And no, there's nothing you can do. There's the provisions that they pay you interest. There's not much you can do. And if you file a return correctly using software or going to a reputable accountant and all the numbers match, there shouldn't be a problem. However, if you're like you're claiming a lot of expenses like interest expenses or travel expenses or business expenses, then they say, wait a second, we're going to take a closer look, and that may delay it as well.
Harvey, in your experience, does Revenue Canada ever lose returns? How long should a taxpayer wait expecting to hear back before they really start to get worried?
Well, if you filed it electronically, you should have a message electronically about your return being processed. And you should get a mail if you're on, depending. Sometimes people can select to be contacted by email exclusively when they file electronically, so you won't get anything in the mail. Sometimes they say, no, I'd rather have the mail to make sure because I don't check my email that often or I'm not computer proficient. So in certain circumstances, there are delays, and especially if it's filed on paper. And again, if you file on paper, I would wait 2 months. And then follow up and ask. There's a helpline, which unfortunately you got to wait several hours because there's only one number, and ask, did you receive my return? Are you processing? Because electronically they would notify you immediately within 2 weeks that, yes, we received your return. But other than that, you just got to hope that, within 2 weeks you follow up, yes, they got it. And if you owe them money, you certainly wouldn't call. And if they owe you money, you'll have to wait, I'm afraid. The government makes the rules. They got the cash. They have all kinds of penalties to assess if you don't pay. And they're kind of late when they owe you.
Here's a question for you. While these folks are waiting for their return, if anything changes, if they say, oh, I forgot to add this receipt for an RRSP, or I think I made a mistake, is it worth getting in touch with Revenue Canada while you're still waiting to alert them to something that may be changing?
Well, I would take the initiative. There's two things to do. If you file electronically through UFile or whatever software, have you gone to an accountant, there is something called a refile procedure where you call it the return and you create what's called a T1 adjustment request and say, whoops, I forgot this. It changes these lines. And you send that in electronically, and within a week, you'll get a reply. If you didn't file electronically, you'll have to mail in something called the T1 adjustment request, where you send in whatever documents you misplaced and you say, please process. But that could take up to 6 months because that has to be treated manually, and there's very few people who deal with their adjustment requests. They have to have some more sophisticated knowledge. So if you have something that you want to change your return on, I would take the initiative and do it on my own. Otherwise, when they get back to you, you're going to start the whole process. It'll take a long time.
Teeing up next tax return year, we generally stop thinking about this. If we've gotten our returns and we've already spent the money, if we've gotten back and we've already spent the money, we're not thinking about anything to do with taxes, federal or provincial at this point. Been there, done that. We're not thinking about it. Is there anything in your experience, Harvey, that we should be thinking about at this time of year that will make the entire tax filing process easier for us next spring?
Well, most people, there's nothing to do because you're a salaried employee and your boss takes care of all the paperwork. If you're a self-employed or have any sort of outside income, I just take your shoebox or paper bag and throw all your receipts in there so they're all in one place, or your medical receipts or charitable receipts or child care payments to whoever caregivers are. Just put it in a box, and when the accountant shows up in April, then you just process that. Other than that, for investment purposes, I would certainly try to minimize taxes by taking advantage of the tax-free savings account and sticking in that $6,000 as soon as you can, or the RRSP if you're going to do that, or the home buyer's plan, because those contributions accumulate interest tax-free. So the sooner you put it in, instead of waiting till February, the sooner you make tax-free income, if you have the money, of course.
I got to ask you, Harvey, do any of your clients actually show up with a shoebox full of receipts?
Well, most of the clients now, it's all online, and they do scan and send them as attachments so that it's kind of less embarrassment when they're in front of you with a box of receipts. And so, yeah, and that way you can take care of it.
I would be one of the ones with a shoebox.
Well, good for you. It means you have outside income that entitles you to deductions.
Yeah, but I think I take some flack at home because it's not a literal shoebox. It's actually an old berry. You know those things you get strawberries in, a berry basket? It's an old berry basket, and everything that comes in, I throw in there. At tax time, I pull it out of the cupboard. And
but that doesn't have a cover. Better off with a shoebox.
Yeah, you're probably right. Harvey Bienenstock, thanks very much for your time.
Anytime, Terry. Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks. Harvey Bienenstock is our resident CPA here at Montreal Now.